Boards of Canada has a near-perfect discography. From the nostalgic synthesizers of Music Has the Right to Children to the abstract claustrophobia of Geogaddi and the apocalyptic beats of Tomorrow's Harvest, you'd be hard-pressed to find a band with such a unanimously loved output of records. But hey, let's talk about the elephant in the room. In 2005, with the release of their third album, the Campfire Headphase, Boards of Canada surprised everyone when they dampened their trademark sound in favor of acoustic elements, traditional song structures, and more of an uplifting tone. They jokingly called it their first official pop record, and ever since, it has become kind of the black sheep in their discography, dividing both critics and fans alike. In this video, we'll take a closer look at what might be Boards of Canada's most misunderstood and underrated work, the Campfire Headphase. Why was it divisive? What influenced this change in mood? And what's the meaning of the campfire? After the breakthrough of Music Has the Right to Children in 1998, Boards of Canada was on everybody's lips. Hailed as pioneers of Electronica, they spawned countless imitators and inspired pretty much everyone else. For a closer look at music, be sure to check out this other video. But the point is, with that album being so groundbreaking, the world was eagerly waiting to see what Boards of Canada was gonna do next. Of course, the fact that they're notorious perfectionists, not shy of taking upwards of a decade in between albums, wasn't really common knowledge at the time, and it would take another 4 years until we saw the follow-up, 2002's Geogaddi. While more than enough has been said about this legendary album, I will say it sparked controversy due to its sinister references ranging from numerology to the occult and possibly even Satanism. And contrary to the more innocent-sounding Music Has the Right to Children, it's Boards of Canada at their absolute darkest, featuring eerier soundscapes than ever before. The duo had actually hinted at this change in tone already on their previous release, the excellent EP In a Beautiful Place Out in the Country, which delved into the cult of the Branch Davidians and its leader David Koresh. But without going any further down the rabbit hole, let's just say that this formula of adding cryptic Easter eggs in their music reached full potential on Geogaddi, which gave us a whole 66 minutes and 6 seconds of it. Peculiar number, huh? Curiously enough, because of these cryptic records, as well as the band's reclusive nature, they rarely did interviews and supposedly resided somewhere in the countryside far from civilization. An almost mythical image of Boards of Canada began to take shape. Speculations arose if they were actually Satanists, pagans, wizards, or even cult leaders themselves. And fans started dissecting every single track, looking for any clues to subliminal messages they might use to brainwash the audience. A few years down the line, Boards of Canada refuted these wild claims, saying that all the mystery and magic and all this kind of nonsense that built up around the last record got to a point where it was just silly. People were understanding things from our music that we didn't put in there, and were saying there was an evil undercurrent to everything. And we're not like that at all. It was a theme that we wanted to pursue on that record, but people have understood from that we always put secret, dark, sinister and satanic things in our music, and that became more important than the music itself. Don't forget, we were in the studio when 9/11 happened. The last 5 months recording Geogaddi were spent in the aftermath of 9/11. It was an anxious time, and it felt like we were going back to the Cold War. We couldn't get rid of it. It affected our mood. The tone got more oppressive, the atmospheres, the samples. Following the release of Geogaddi, Boards of Canada knew that they needed to change, to shake this bizarre image of the band, and maybe even reinvent themselves.
Interesting questions for Boards Boards of Canada who are about to play for us. Are you there, Marcus?
Hello, yeah, hi, John.
I've got the impression in my head, I don't know whether this is from some press release over which you have absolutely no control at all, but you live somewhere that's uncontactable by telephone, somewhere very remote. Is this true?
Yeah, that's just about correct, actually.
I'm not going to ask you where it is, because obviously you don't want people coming there and spoiling it all for you.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably been exaggerated a little bit, but I think as far from technology as we can get, it's about as good as we can get as far as we're concerned, yeah.
That does make sense.
The Campfire Headphase is an album that's significantly different from the one preceding it. If Geogaddi was the equivalent of taking acid and looking in the mirror, a nightmarish fever dream, the Campfire Headphase has a nice wooden, outdoorsy feel to it, almost reminiscent of being a child away at summer camp, taking a road trip with friends, or going hiking in the wilderness. In the wake of 9/11, and with modern civilization seemingly getting crazier by the day, Boards of Canada said that the album's got no hidden agenda. Only thing it says is, "F all this stuff, switch off the news, the job off, get out of the city, and take the time to go back and think about happier times." Everybody has a year in their head, the best summer of their lives. Now, romanticizing non-urban life wasn't anything new for Boards of Canada. Apart from living rural lives themselves, nature appears everywhere in their music, from field recordings to samples, artwork and titles. They've also frequently mentioned the ancient practice of gathering around a campfire as one of their favorite activities. In the Campfire Headphase, the campfire itself thus acts as a clear symbol of that innate, primordial urge to escape modern life and all its burdens. Keep that in mind, because we'll come back to it later. Rather than its themes, what separates Campfire the most from their previous work is the sound palette. Gone are many of the trademark synthesizers, intricate rhythms, and children's voices. Here, Boards of Canada instead makes heavy use of acoustics, lo-fi guitars and drums, aiming for a Californian summer kind of sound, in the vein of artists such as Joni Mitchell and John Denver. We imagined a trip where someone parks their car in the middle of the night somewhere in the country, lights a campfire, and then dreams up the rest of their trip. The album has a vibe of exploring, traveling, taking a car trip, and getting lost in a surreal world where you don't understand what's going on during the journey. And that world is set in the golden age that we're paying tribute to, a beautiful time that we personally remember in North America and Canada, when things were simpler and happier than they are now. This new acoustic direction might sound strange for an Electronica act to pursue, and the guitars especially bewildered many fans at the time. But Boards of Canada has in fact always considered them to be more of a regular band than a dance artist. And on previous records, there are all kinds of real instruments, but they're heavily processed, to the point of being easily mistaken for synths. Namely, the duo has always manipulated, degraded and abused their recordings with the main objective of aging them, and Campfire is no exception. Just listen to the guitar in track 2, Chroma Key Dreamcoat, that was apparently recorded on a beach with the most f***ed up tape recorder Marcus could find. Or in 84 Pontiac Dream, where they deliberately went for that 1980s glitzy TV film score vibe, at one point even aiming to recreate the closing jingle from the show The A-Team, only then to pummel it down to how the tapes would sound today, after years of wear and tear. Indeed, finding beauty in the imperfections really is what defines Boards of Canada, and similar use of texture is not only applied to the music, but also to their whole aesthetic. The artwork of the Campfire Headphase consists of a series of sun-bleached Polaroids, so mutilated by time that it's apparently meant to feel like you've just found them in someone's old house, and that the people in the photos are all dead. Boards of Canada went on to say that When you find an old photograph that has been exposed to light for quite some time and lost its hue and faded as a result, regardless of the context of the photograph, it always tends to cause one to feel a sense of sorrow. The cover art is quite reflective of that. Now, a real highlight and perhaps the most uplifting track on the entire album is Day Van Cowboy. At first, its distorted guitars and gorgeous strings might draw comparisons to an artist like Moby, but this is undeniably the work of Boards of Canada, merging several of their nostalgic influences. In this case, the Chevrolet Day Van, which was commonly used to travel around North America in the 80s, and the 1973 surf movie Crystal Voyager. They imagined it like this. It's about a surfer who thinks he's a hero. He has a very personal fantasy about going out into the wilderness, doing extreme things and staying overnight in a van that he customizes. The van was called a day van or astro van. It's about being in touch with nature, traveling and adventure. When we are writing songs, we often feel like we're soundtracking someone's road trip. This time we felt like we were making an anthem to honor Day Van. Day Van Cowboy is notable for being Boards of Canada's first mainstream single, for lack of a better word, and it was also accompanied by their first official music video. On a more personal note, back in high school in 2006, Day Van Cowboy was the first song I ever heard by Boards of Canada, and since then, it's always had a special place in my heart. It's one of those rare, goosebump-inducing tracks that really makes me appreciate how amazing it is and how incredibly lucky we are to be alive. Something that we sadly all too often take for granted. Even though Campfire generally tends to have a more adventurous and uplifting tone, it ain't all sunshine and rainbows. Boards of Canada talk about the importance of their music not being black and white. That if you want something to resonate in either direction, you should include something bittersweet, ambiguous, and maybe even insidious. They do this by, for instance, using barely audible yet unsettling samples, or perhaps slightly detune their instruments to create the sense that something just feels off. The Campfire Headphase also has a contender for maybe the saddest Boards of Canada song of all time, namely the closing track, Farewell Fire. A heartbreakingly beautiful but simple ambient piece, played with immense amount of emotion. The track goes on for a whole 8.5 minutes, but early on starts to very subtly fade out, to the point where we can barely even hear the last 2 minutes. It's reminiscent in a way of a fire that's slowly going out. It doesn't want to. It lingers, holds on, and grasps for every single oxygen molecule to keep burning. But in the end, it's inevitable. It dies. Which brings me right back to the meaning of the campfire. Since the dawn of man, campfires have been used as a means of heat, shelter, and protection from the dangers of the outside world. And I think Boards of Canada uses the campfire here as a symbol for the music itself. They summarized their intentions with the album like this. It seems the threat of 9/11 has become permanent. The world has been permanently changed. Permanent danger, more chaos, darkness, and paranoia. If you experience that day in, day out, you have to ask yourself, how can we escape this? How can we forget about reality? Instead of going insane, you can look for a way out. But instead of reflecting it in a dark record, we decided to make an escapist soundtrack, like a kind of sanctuary, a day-glow vista you can visit by putting the record on. With the Campfire Headphase, Boards of Canada aims to provide a refuge from the ever more crazy, tumultuous world around us. Yes, inevitably, the music ends and the fire goes out. But what's so beautiful about music is that whenever we wish, we just have to rewind the tape, flip the record over, or press play to once again ignite the fire and access our most treasured memories. Relive all those endless summer days that are forever preserved within the flames, keeping us safe and warm. The Campfire Headphase was released in October of 2005 and received generally positive reviews. Some saw it as a bold blend of genres, while others weren't as convinced, feeling the inclusion of guitars especially to be something out of place in the mysterious ethos of Boards of Canada. I can see what they mean. Perhaps Campfire, with its poppier sound, just didn't have the same dynamic range as their previous records, which were beautiful, dark, eerie, and nostalgic all at the same time. But I think it's an unfair comparison, since they all aim for different things. There really are moments of striking beauty in Campfire, and knowing what Boards of Canada set out to achieve, I think the record accomplishes it perfectly. The Campfire Headphase is a reminder of what music can be, a means of escape, giving us joyous, introspective moments during our darkest days. And it's also a lesson in integrity, doing whatever feels right for you, without seeking the approval of others, whether they be family, friends, or hardcore fans. Next year will be the 20-year anniversary of the Campfire Headphase, and even though it might never get the recognition it deserves, it actually has earned a better reputation through the years. In the end, thankfully, I think fans finally came to accept Campfire for what it is, instead of wishing it to be something that it's not.